We've had more comments in from frustrated Celtic fans today who really aren't enjoying this transfer window one little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of patience is probably required, but I can understand why it's thin in the ground. If you went on to read the next paragraph of that, it's something along the lines of Celtic will spend money, it probably will be significant, because that's what happens, that's what they do, that's what they will do before this transfer window closes. And it's been this similar story, and whether the fans can get a little bit angsty, but Celtic have a habit of delivering. They're not daft, they know what they're doing, and I think the board, will deliver some sizable signings before the end of the transfer window. The problem that they've got, and this is why it feels a little bit different this time, is I'm not sure that even if they do manage to do that, that's going to be enough to satisfy the Celtic supporters, who can quite reasonably say, well, guys, we don't have the turmoil. We've got a bunch of money sitting in the bank. We shouldn't be in this position at this stage. And I think that there's a point in that. And I think that the Celtic supporters are being asked to be patient when they've got every right to say, well, hold on a wee second here. There should be more bodies in at Lennoxtown right now. Brendan Rodgers should have the sort of players available to him that he thinks strengthens his starting 11. Because right now, and here we are just a handful of days before the league campaign gets underway, with Flag Day against St Mirren on Sunday, Celtic's first 11 is significantly weaker than it was. And, the accusation, I think it was Mark on here, said Celtic are really great at selling players and just or making money and not so great at spending it. And that's fair. And certainly it's applicable to where they are right now at this very point, where they let Kuhn go 17 million, where's the replacement? They let Kyogo go way back in January, no replacement. That's not great. That's not a good look for Celtic, and that is why, coupled, I would say, although Celtic fans would probably deny it, with the fact that there is a bit of significant activity going on the other side of the garden fence, that the neighbours are trying to get their house in order and seem to be prepared to spend a few quid doing it. So I think it all adds into one, and I think that right now I can completely understand why the Celtic fans are unhappy, although I'll come back to it. I do think it's the same movie. I do expect Celtic to make significant purchases, and I would think it maybe enough to win a significant chunk of the Celtic fans back and have, and they can all hide into the, after August, after the window shuts, so they can all look forward to the season, knowing that their squad has been improved and it looks robust enough to go the distance. But I think there will be some who have actually got themselves into a mindset now that this simply isn't good enough. And even if Celtic do throw the kitchen sink at it before the end of the window, they're going to be grumbling about the fact that it's been left this late. And I've got some sympathy with that, I have to say.
Well, Thomas in the comments says Keith Yamada is the replacement for Kyogo. He also says we've upgraded at left back, added a Swedish international in midfield. Up front is where we need to strengthen. But I think Mark makes a good point. He says the longer the window goes on, the more desperate the club is and the easier it is for the club to be held to ransom. We don't need another Adam Ida paying well over the odds for average players.
And Mick Gannon has been making that very point for a number of weeks now, that he feels that Celtic have got themselves into the position where they've had to spend more than necessary. Later in the window when deals were there to be done for a lot less money earlier in the window, maybe that's an argument. I have to say that I come down in the camp. These guys know what they're doing. They're really experienced. They're serial winners. I think I'll be really surprised. In fact, I know for a fact they are working on things. They're trying to get things done. For whatever reason, it hasn't gone very smoothly. I totally accept that. And again, I have to say that I can understand why Celtic fans are a little bit unhappy right now. They've got every right to be a little bit unhappy. But the Celtic argument would be, well, guys, can you not just trust us? We've won 13 out of the last 14 titles. We know what we're doing here. We know how to strengthen a squad. We do it every year. And the other argument to add weight to that would be, look, if as has been discussed on here, if Kieran Tierney had been magicked out of thin air and nobody knew last January that he was going to be arriving at Celtic Park this summer, Celtic fans would have been breaking out the bunting and running it down the length of London Road on the basis of that signing. Nygren is another one. I think Celtic have been really shrewd there. They got him for, what was it, 1.7 million thereabouts?
Yep.
When really that's way below what we think his market value is. But just because Celtic were really clever and shrewd and did that deal, you almost feel as if they'd get a lot more credit for it if they'd spent 6 or 7 million on it.
Yeah.
And that people would be happier and that they'd get a bit more slack cut. But it's just the situation that they're in. And the only people that can do anything about that, meaningful in terms of winning back over the hearts and minds a little bit and making it feel like a happier place, that's the guys in charge of the transfer kitty at Celtic. And there is an urgency on it. They really need to start doing something because there is a title party to consider this weekend. And right now, the general mood that we're seeing on here and various other places, and I totally accept social media is not usually the most accurate of yardsticks, but there are a lot of unhappy Celtic fans out there just now who believe that the club should be in a stronger position than they are. And I can't disagree with that. And I'm sure Brendan Rodgers wouldn't disagree with it, most importantly, because he's the guy that has to put this team together and has to get through the first few weeks of the season and hopefully, from his point of view, picking up momentum, picking up points and getting himself into a position where Celtic are ready for the Champions League playoff.
There is some Celtic fans pleading for caution in the comments. You can see P. McLaughlin there. Rodgers has said in the past, sometimes things don't happen until the last 2 weeks of August. I'm sure that's the plan again. Joseph says it's frustrating, but you can't just spend money because the fans say so, in my opinion. But this one from Stephen, he says, I believe the reaction to Celtic not bringing a Hollywood-type signing on the hotline is over the top. Our league is hard to attract the quality Rodgers craves because of lack of competition on the domestic front. Having 3 artificial surfaces doesn't help Celtic. It doesn't help either. Celtic would splash the cash, but unfortunately, the English Premiership is where the best players want to test themselves.
Well, that's interesting because what we've had there tonight, and a lot of comments tonight suggesting that Celtic fans are being more realistic towards it. Mm-hmm. And that would be helpful because this is what I was saying at the start of that column, Daniel, that, you know, what does the lessons from previous seasons tell you? It tells you that Celtic will spend money. That they've not spent as much as the fans would have wanted at this particular point is an inconvenience, I think, for the Celtic board. But it would need to be a very strange window, albeit it doesn't happen all the time. But you would say that most of the time, particularly over the summer months, Celtic do spend. They are spenders. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll spend significant numbers again before the end of this window. But it just feels different this time because there's an impatience.
Yeah. I think
that's probably born of the fact that Brendan Rodgers will be looking at his first 11 right now and saying, well, we're weaker than we were when we started last season. And no manager wants to be in that position.
I think the frustration as well, Keith, comes from the fact that, I mean, in January, what did the account show? 60-odd million in the bank.
Of course that adds to it.
Frimpong, 3 or 4 million? 20 million odd for another year of season ticket books. Lagerbielke and Kwon, even they've went for a few million, and they've spent 3 or 4 million on 6 transfers. So
which tells me there's money coming.
Aye.
The Celtic fans are about to see the colour of the club's money. I will be astonished if that's not the case, but it doesn't mean that right now, as things stand, people aren't getting a little bit angsty. They are, and it's actually growing by the day.
Aye.